I never thought I'd hear those words come out of my mother's mouth. She's stronger and better for you. The sentence cut through me like a blade, sharper than any insult she had ever thrown at me. I was 25 at the time, young enough to still believe in love's promises, but old enough to know betrayal when I heard it. I stood frozen just outside the kitchen door during my cousin's graduation party, clutching my glass like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My boyfriend of 3 years, Mark, had gone to grab us drinks, but when he didn't return, I went looking for him. I wish I hadn't. Through the crack of the door I saw my mother standing with him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her voice as casual as if she were discussing a family recipe. Elizabeth has always been the achiever, the one with real potential. You deserve someone who pushes you forward, not someone who holds you back. My heart dropped. My breath caught in my throat, and in that instant I felt the fragile strings of my world begin to snap. She wasn't just criticizing me, she was selling my sister to the man I loved. Mark's face shifted, first in surprise, then in contemplation. He didn't laugh it off, didn't defend me. He just stood there listening, letting her words soak into his skin like poison. I wanted to burst into scream, to demand he reject the twisted idea, but I couldn't move. My legs felt anchored to the floor, my chest so heavy it was suffocating me. Elizabeth has been watching you for years, my mother continued, her tone almost conspiratorial. She's just waiting for her chance. Mark hesitated. I don't know, Mrs. Davis. Audrey and I have been together a long time, and what do you have to show for it? My mother arched an eyebrow. Elizabeth just made junior partner at her law firm. What is Audrey doing with that art degree? Making coffee and sketching portraits nobody buys. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. My struggling art career, the thing I had fought so hard for, reduced to nothing in her sharp, cruel words. But it wasn't her voice that destroyed me. It was his. Mark's quiet nod, the thoughtful way he absorbed her judgment. He didn't argue. He didn't fight for me. In that moment I knew something had broken between us, even if it hadn't shattered yet. I backed away, swallowing down the sob that threatened to escape. I should have confronted them that night. I should have demanded the truth before the lies wrapped themselves around us like ivy. But I smiled through the rest of the party, pretending I hadn't heard a word. That was my first mistake. The weeks after were subtle but unbearable. Mark began slipping Elizabeth's name into conversations, praising her latest case, win, mentioning her fitness regimen, even recommending legal documentaries she liked. Each comment was a paper cut, small but bleeding me dry. Then came the late nights at work, the cancelled dates, the unexplained absences. When I found texts between them, plans for lunches he had never told me about, he brushed it off. She's your sister, Audrey. It'd be weird if we didn't get along. I questioned my own sanity. Was I paranoid? Oversensitive? At family dinners, I watched their smiles exchanged across the table, private glances that excluded me. My best friend Jamie saw it before I could admit it myself. Something's different with him, she whispered one night after another dinner cut short. I wanted to scream that I already knew, that I had heard my mother hand him over to my sister. But I stayed silent, clinging to the illusion that things could still be saved. 3 months later, the truth came crashing down. I showed up at his apartment with concert tickets, a surprise gift for the man I thought I'd build my life with. But the surprise was mine. A trail of clothes led me down the hallway. My sister's blouse lay crumpled on the floor. Their laughter drifted through the half-closed bedroom door before I pushed it open. Elizabeth's hair spilled across his chest, their bodies tangled in sheets that should have been mine. The tickets slipped from my hands, scattering like confetti for a celebration I wasn't invited to. He scrambled. She sat up with irritation instead of shame. Maybe this is for the best, she said, as though my heartbreak was nothing but a mild inconvenience. I walked away without screaming, without throwing things, though my soul burned too. That night I felt hollow, stripped of everything I thought I was. And when I confronted my mother the next day, her lack of remorse carved the final wound. Elizabeth deserves someone who matches her ambition, she said coldly. You'll find someone more suited to your temperament. In her eyes, I had never been enough. Not then, not ever. For weeks after that discovery, I lived like a ghost, haunting my own life. I went to work, painted at my studio, nodded at friends who asked how I was, but inside I was hollow. My sister and my ex paraded their happiness without shame. Elizabeth moved into his apartment within a month, her things replacing mine as though I had never existed. And my mother, always with that cutting smile, introduced them as if she had orchestrated the perfect match, proud of her handiwork. The betrayal was total. I wasn't just losing a boyfriend. I had been replaced, in my own family narrative cast aside, so my sister could shine brighter. Every Sunday dinner became a stage where their affection was flaunted, and my silence was measured. I sat there smiling weakly, sipping wine to numb myself, while my mother gushed about Elizabeth's new diamond necklace, about Mark's generosity, about how some couples are just meant to be. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone the truth, that my own mother had played matchmaker, had planted the seed of betrayal, had poisoned the well of my relationship. But who would believe me? Elizabeth was golden, perfect, the daughter who could do no wrong. And me? I was the sensitive one, the dreamer with messy emotions and fragile ambitions. In their eyes, my pain was proof that I wasn't strong enough, so I built a fortress around myself. I buried my grief in my work, pouring every ounce of pain into canvases that no one but me would ever see. I painted twisted roots, fractured faces, bleeding skies, images that felt truer than words. And slowly, quietly, I began to rebuild. Years passed. I avoided family gatherings whenever I could, but life has a cruel way of pulling you back into the orbit of those who hurt you. Weddings, funerals, birthdays. I'd stand in corners clutching a drink, watching Elizabeth and Mark play the part of the perfect couple. And each time my mother would glance at me with that smug flicker in her eyes, as if daring me to challenge her masterpiece. But life is not without its twists. I was 31 when I met David. He was everything Mark wasn't: steady, kind, patient. He didn't mock my art, he celebrated it. He bought my paintings when no one else would, not out of pity, but because he saw something in them worth keeping. For the first time in years, I felt seen, valued, cherished. He knew about my past, about Elizabeth, about my mother, about Mark. And instead of shrinking away from the mess, he held me closer, reminding me that betrayal was their legacy, not mine. 2 years later, we married quietly, a small ceremony with only close friends. No family, no pretense, just us. I didn't send invitations to Elizabeth or Mark. I didn't even tell my mother. It was the one day of my life I refused to let them contaminate with their shadows. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. On my 35th birthday, David insisted on throwing me a party. He wanted me to celebrate not just the passing of years, but the life I had built from ashes. Friends filled the room. Laughter bounced off the walls. Music played softly in the background. For once, I felt light, unburdened. Until the door opened. Elizabeth walked in hand with Mark, my mother trailing behind them like a queen entering her court. They weren't invited. They weren't welcome. Yet there they were, smiling as though they belonged. My heart stuttered, my breath caught, but I stood tall. David came to my side instantly, his arm firm around my waist. "Do you want me to ask them to leave?" he whispered. "No," I said, surprising myself. "Let them stay." Because suddenly I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. As the evening wore on, I could feel their eyes on me. My mother's sharp, assessing. Elizabeth's smug. Mark's curious, almost guilty. They mingled, made small talk, and waited for the moment I would break for the familiar spectacle of my humiliation. But that moment never came, because when David raised his glass for a toast, he pulled me close and said, "To my wife, the most resilient, brilliant woman I've ever known. You've taught me what strength looks like, and I will spend my life honoring you." The room erupted in applause. My cheeks burned, my eyes stung with tears, but I smiled. And when I caught sight of Elizabeth's face frozen mid-smile, and Mark's eyes widening with shock, I felt something inside me settle. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me to rise from the ruins. The silence that fell over the room after David's toast wasn't loud enough for anyone but me to hear. It was in the way Elizabeth's hand twitched around her wine glass, the way Mark stared into the distance, as though searching for air, and the way my mother's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she glued it back in place. To everyone else, it was just another speech at a birthday party. But to us, to them, it was a revelation. I had never been anyone's most resilient, brilliant woman. Not in my mother's eyes, not in Mark's, not even in my own for the longest time. And now here I was, honored in front of them, the man at my side, declaring my worth without hesitation. It was the very thing they had denied me for so long. Elizabeth approached later that evening, her lips painted in a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Well, you certainly know how to put on a show," she said, her voice dripping with sugar and venom. I tilted my head, meeting her gaze. It wasn't a show, it was my life. For once, she didn't have a snappy retort. Her eyes flicked toward David, who was across the room, laughing with my friends, completely at ease in a way Mark never had been. She saw the difference. She couldn't unsee it. Mark, on the other hand, lingered near the bar. He avoided me for most of the night, as though standing too close to me might ignite the guilt he had buried for years. Eventually, though, he approached, his face solemn. "Audrey," he began, his voice low, "you look happy, different." I let the silence stretch, forcing him to sit in it. "I am different," I finally said. "Because I chose someone who sees me. That's all it ever took." His mouth opened as if to explain, to defend himself, but I held up a hand. "Don't. You made your choice years ago, you and Elizabeth. And my mother. I lived through the wreckage. But now," I smiled faintly. "Now I've built something better." The words seemed to sting more than any scream I could have unleashed. His shoulders sagged, his gaze dropped, and for once Mark looked small, like a man realizing too late what he had thrown away. Then there was my mother. She cornered me near the cake table, her tone sharp, her words meant to cut. "You think this man changes anything? You're still the same fragile girl you've always been. Don't fool yourself." But I wasn't fragile anymore. Not by her definition. I met her stare, steady and unflinching. "No, Mom. I'm stronger than I've ever been. Because for once I stopped listening to you." The flicker in her eyes betrayed her. It was anger, yes, but also fear. The kind of fear that comes when the puppet realizes the strings have been cut. As the party wound down, I watched the three of them leave together. Their smiles tight, their steps hurried. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the abandoned daughter or the betrayed sister. I felt like the woman who had survived them, who had risen above them, who no longer needed their approval to breathe. Later that night, as David and I sat on the couch surrounded by leftover cake and scattered wrapping paper, he took my hand. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. I leaned my head against his shoulder. "Free, finally free." But the truth is, freedom didn't erase the scars. It didn't rewrite the years of doubt, the nights I cried myself to sleep, the memories of overhearing my mother barter my future away. Those wounds still lingered. They always would. But what changed was my perspective. Those wounds no longer defined me, they shaped me, but they didn't own me. I knew then that revenge wasn't about making them hurt the way they hurt me. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It was simply about living well, about rising above the lies and the betrayal, about becoming someone they could never have imagined I'd become. And that was enough. Weeks after the party, whispers began to ripple through the family. Elizabeth had grown restless. Mark had grown insecure. And my mother, though she would never admit it, had started to lose her grip. I didn't spread rumors, I didn't need to. People see what they want to see. But when the cracks in perfection widen, no one can ignore them. At a cousin's wedding, I overheard relatives whispering about Mark's wandering eye, about Elizabeth's temper flaring in public, about how my mother seemed to pit them against each other like gladiators in an arena. The empire they built on betrayal was crumbling, and I wasn't the one holding the hammer. Karma had taken the wheel, and I was only watching. Elizabeth cornered me in the ladies' room during that wedding. Her voice was sharp, her face flushed. "Do you enjoy this? Watching us struggle?" I looked at her, calm and steady. "No, I don't enjoy it. But I'm not surprised. You built your life on lies, Elizabeth. What did you think would happen?" She glared. But behind the anger I saw fear. Fear of losing what she stole. Fear of facing herself in the mirror without Mark propping her up, without my mother pulling the strings. She had taken what wasn't hers, but possession had not brought her peace. As for Mark, I caught him one evening after a family gathering standing alone outside smoking a cigarette like he used to when we were young. He looked older, wearier, a man who had gambled everything and realized the prize wasn't worth the cost. "You were always the better one," he said quietly when he noticed me. "I see that now." I didn't respond. What could I say? His regret was a ghost that haunted only him. I had no room for it in my life anymore. And my mother, my mother. She tried to reassert control, making sly comments, undermining me in small ways. But the power she once had over me was gone. Every attempt she made to belittle me only reflected back on her. People started to see her, not as the wise matriarch, but as the manipulator she truly was. That was her downfall, not my revenge, but her own truth finally revealed. One evening David and I hosted another dinner, smaller, just close friends. As I looked around the table, I realized how different this life was from the one my mother had carved out for me. There was laughter, warmth, respect, not competition, not manipulation. My scars still ached, but they were part of me, reminders of what I had survived. When the last guest left, I sat with David by the fireplace. "Do you ever wish it had all been different?" he asked softly. I thought about it, about the years lost to betrayal, about the tears shed, the trust broken, the love stolen. But then I thought about where I was now, about the strength I had found in myself, about the man beside me. "No," I said finally. "Because if it had been different, I might never have learned how strong I could be. I might never have found you." He kissed my hand, his eyes filled with that quiet certainty I had come to trust more than anything. And in that moment I knew the truth. The revenge wasn't in their downfall. It was in my survival, in the life I had built despite them. To anyone watching this, I want to say this: sometimes betrayal comes from the people you least expect, from the ones you thought would protect you. It shatters you, it breaks you down, it makes you question everything you are. But you are not defined by what they did. You are defined by how you rise from it. If my story means anything, it's this: don't let the ones who betray you steal your future. Don't let their choices dictate your worth. Stand tall even when you feel small, and one day you'll see that the life you create will be the truest form of justice you'll ever need. So if this story touched your heart, if you've ever faced betrayal and found the courage to rise, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of our strength. And don't forget to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story too.